Now this is Sam Langford, and he is thought of as one of the greatest boxers of all time. And even in his day, about 100 years ago, he was known as the greatest fighter nobody knows. He was only a small guy, but he had an extremely powerful punch, and he would fight lightweight to heavyweight. And you can see him here doing some very interesting training. What he's doing here is pushing his opponent away, and this is what I would call push punching or structure-based striking. He's using his structure to create force and push his opponent away, and you can see they're all much bigger than him. And I must shout out to Rob, one of my subscribers, who told me about Sam Langford, and he's well worth checking him out. I'll leave the links to this video below, but you can search for him. There's lots of videos on YouTube about him. Very, very interesting fighter with some interesting techniques. And this relates to what I'm teaching here on this channel quite directly, because what I want to talk about today is structure-based striking, or the straight punch. And the straight punch is really, I would say, the most efficient or the simplest form of the structure-based striking. And it's what Sam Langford is doing there. It's not so much striking with impact, but striking with a push. You are pushing through the structure. So you can see me here now pushing the punch bag with a punch. But it's not a full forced, full speed punch. It's a relatively slow punch, and I'm concentrating on the alignment of my bones. It's all to do with the skeleton. I've got to get the skeleton just right, so that the force transmits from the back leg through the spine, through the scapula, the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and right down to the front two knuckles. So I'm pushing through this alignment. And it's also about the tendons. You see, I've also got to create a tension, an isometric tension through the joints to hold this structure together. And now you can see me there with the lead hand bouncing it. I'm just bouncing the punch into the bag. It's a push. So you wouldn't call this a practical punch. It's just a training method. But what I'm training is quite specific. It's structure. I'm training the structure of my body and holding it and using that structure to create force. Now I'm just leaving a few turning kicks in here, because this, out of interest, is the opposite. This is a momentum based strike. In other words, my leg is loose. I'm using my spine and my hips to throw out the leg, but the leg whips out and the knee down to the ankle is relaxed. It's loose. It lands on the bag in a dead fashion. It's like a dead leg. And you can also think of this even as a football kick, but what you're doing here is creating a whip. I'm creating a whip down from my hip through the knee to the ankle to the instep, and using that whip to create momentum. So that's the opposite of a structure-based strike. A structure-based strike is you are pushing through the structure. The whole structure must remain together at the moment of impact. With that turning kick, it doesn't matter about the structure. It's throwing the foot out, and that foot all by itself has momentum, and that creates the power in the strike. In a way, the rest of the body doesn't matter. You could be in the air, jumping up as you do it. Now, this is a basic punch in martial arts, and all traditional martial arts have some variation of this exact punch. But you can see what I'm focusing on here is very specific alignment. I'm trying to maintain the natural S-curve of the spine. There's a spring in the hips, a spring in the shoulders, and I'm pivoting through the spine and bouncing out through the structure into the punch bag. Now, if I go back and see the video again in slow motion, you can see it a little bit clearer here. And what I'm doing is actually creating tension down the tendon line of the arm. You see, I've got to get a nice straight line through the arm, straight through to the front two knuckles and into the bag. If I don't get that alignment right, what happens is I lose the power, or the power is dissipated away. You've got to get the alignment just right so the back foot transmits through the hip, through the spine, through the shoulder, and down the straight line of your arm to the front two knuckles. And of course, the most important thing to get right is the wrist, because if you bend the wrist, you can injure your wrist if you don't get that alignment just right. And you can see there, I bent the wrist, so the alignment went off slightly, but I've got good practice at doing this, so I know how to recover from a mistake like that. And you can actually see my wrist had a bit of a spring to it. It still bounced and sprang back to the straight position afterwards. But if you're going to practice this, you've got to do slowly and carefully, because you can of course hurt yourself if you get the alignment wrong. You see, even though this is classed as a basic punch in martial arts, it's the very first punch you learn, it is not basic at all. This is highly advanced practice, and it's overlooked. It's overlooked in most martial arts. It's just thought of as, okay, try and get it to look about right. It's not about looking right, it's about feeling right. You see, there are minute adjustments in your structure that you have to get together. Without those, it doesn't quite work. You see, I'm holding my belly in, I've got a tension in the obliques, I've got a dynamic tension in the spine, I'm pivoting on the spine, and I'm trying to feel the transference of force from the hips through the shoulders and then down the straight arm. And there you saw the tourniquet again with a loose leg, but it still comes from the spine. The basic structure is the beginning of the spine. And here with a very basic punch, you can see as well how the bag moves. I don't move. You see, this is the important thing to look at. What is the bag doing? There's no recoil into my body. You see, if you get the alignment wrong when you make impact, you fall backwards. So I've got to get the alignment just right that I don't fall backwards. The only thing that moves is the bag. I'm actually pushing with my structure into the bag. I'm penetrating the bag with the punch. And this is important to feel. If you can feel this, you can feel that the structure is actually driving in, then you know, you can feel the efficiency of it, then you can start increasing the speed. Once you increase the speed, it becomes more and more like a practical punch. But for now, just think of this as body dynamics. This is not actually combat, because you're not going to fight doing just exactly this. But the ability to do this makes your fighting much more efficient. Now let's break it down a bit further. You see, let's take one arm. I've got to get the alignment right down the forearm to the front two knuckles, and I've got to create tension through the tendons of the arm. So what I do, pull the elbow in like this and twist the wrist out. So I've got a counter twist from the elbow to the wrist. And now as I extend out, I create more and more tension in this counter twist. So my elbow is pulling in one way and my wrist is twisting the other way, and then furthermore I'm stretching out to the front knuckle, the first finger knuckle, or the first two knuckles. And if you see, there's a straight line going down the forearm to the front knuckle. And what I do now, you see, is using this tension, I'm creating an isometric tension through the tendon line of my arm, right from the shoulder to the scapula, and pointing it in exactly a straight direction. You can think of it as like shooting an arrow. You see, I'm using the elasticity, the natural bounce of my body, and I'm trying to build that energy up and then throw it out in a straight line. But here you can see I'm just literally using the arms only, the elbow and the wrist joint only, and I can still generate a very powerful punch. Now here's the minor details of the fingers. Now this in Kung Fu is called eagle claw, but what I'm actually doing is favouring the front two knuckles, and actually it's the top single first knuckle. So I create this tension, a stretch in the fist, and as I hold the elbow in but rotate the wrist out, you can see it. You'll feel a stretch all the way down to the front finger and the front knuckle. It's nearly like I'm pointing the first finger out, and you'll feel this nice stretch down the forearm to this first knuckle, and that is the focus of the punch. It's not just the first knuckle, it's the first knuckle connected to the forearm all the way to the elbow, to the spine, etc., etc., down to the hips and the legs. There, that's the line there, right out to the first knuckle. So again, you don't think about punching so much as trying to feel this alignment and this stretch and this tension down the tendons of your forearm. And this ensures that your arm is going to be very strong. Now again, I have a loose fist and I close up the fingers towards the end. So again, this helps me to maintain a stretch through my body up until the moment where I need the tension. You see, I've got maximum tension at the moment of impact. And this tension at the moment you can see here is just in the forearm, but really what I want is this tension all the way through the structure. So now you notice the shoulders are up and back a bit. I've got a tension in the scapula. I'm pulling them slightly back. Now even though I'm twisting slightly forward through the spine, I'm not actually extending my shoulder all the way forward. I'm locking my shoulder into the mid position, and I'm locking my spine into the mid position. I'm driving my back hip forward. I've got a twist through the spine, and then I stretch through the forearm into that front knuckle, and I point it in a straight line. Again, think of it as shooting an arrow. This is the straight punch. So I've got to create a nice straight line all the way down to the front knuckle, but I've got to feel the tension through the whole body, the alignment through the whole body. And at the moment of impact, the tension must be there from the back leg, through the hip, through the spine, through the shoulder, all the way out through the wrist to the finger. You see, this training is about form. It's about form and structure, but not form just for any old reason, not form to look good. I mean, it looks good because you've got the alignment right. That's just incidental. It's about form for a scientific reason. It's for efficiency. The better the form, the greater the efficiency. So you've got to do this with knowledge. You're not doing it just for any old reason, not for even traditional reasons. The reason has got to be for maximum efficiency. And this here, the straight punch, is extremely efficient and extremely powerful if you get the form right. So don't think about fighting, don't think about practical applications, just think about trying to get the form right, the structure right, and activate the tendons, the tension, and use that to push through the structure. Okay, I hope this made sense. Please do leave any questions or comments below. I will get back to you, and I look forward to seeing you in any of these other videos here.